The metallic pods fell from the sky like rain. 50 of them, each carrying a different alien species, dropped down onto the scarred surface of Karath 7. Teo gripped the seat as his pod shook violently, the heat building around him. Through the small window, he could see nothing but orange and red. The entire world seemed to be on fire. When the pod finally stopped moving, Teo waited. He had learned long ago that rushing into unknown situations was how soldiers died. He took slow breaths and checked his suit. The readings were bad, very bad. The outside temperature was 87 degrees Celsius. The air was thick with chemicals that would burn his lungs within minutes. The radiation levels made his suit's counter click rapidly like an angry insect. Teo was a human from Earth, a small planet most aliens had never heard of. But he had trained his whole life for moments like this. Survival was not just his job. It was his reason for being alive. The Intergalactic Council had chosen him for this test because he had lived through worse than most soldiers ever saw. He had survived the ice deserts of Norn, the acid swamps of Valaxis, and the endless storms of Haven. Now they wanted to see if humans could survive the worst place in the galaxy. He opened the pod door slowly and stepped into hell. The ground burned his boots. The air felt like breathing fire. Teo moved quickly to a rocky area nearby, where some large stones might give him shelter. His suit's cooling system worked overtime, struggling against the heat. He could hear other pods landing around him in the distance. Screams followed. Not all creatures could adapt to this world as fast as others. In the first hour, Teo watched from behind his rocks. He saw a crystalline being, a Valorian, try to walk across open ground. Its body started to crack under the heat. It made a sound like breaking glass and stopped moving. There were 49 other species down here now. Teo knew that most of them would be dead by the end of the day. A group of insectoid creatures called the Krell emerged from their pod in an organized line. They were built for fighting, their hard bodies designed for war. But this was not a war they could fight. The heat and chemicals began eating away at their shells. They moved as a group, searching for shelter. Teo watched them carefully. They could be dangerous. Then something unexpected happened. A creature that should not have survived crawled out of the water-based pod. It was a Thessian, a species that needed water to breathe. Its name was Jiwoo, and she was different from her kind. While her body still needed moisture, she had been born with unusual genes that let her survive in dry air for short times. Not for long, but long enough. Jiwoo moved slowly across the burning ground, breathing in short gasps. She was searching for water, for shelter, for anything that would keep her alive. Her large eyes, designed to see in deep ocean darkness, squinted against the bright light. She looked lost. She looked terrified. But she was alive and moving forward. That was when Jiwoo almost walked into a group of aggressive Valorians. They were humanoid but larger, with skin that looked like stone. They had already started fighting each other over resources. When they saw Jiwoo, they saw something easy to kill. They moved toward her with violence in their movements. Teo did not think about what he was doing. He simply acted. He moved from behind his rocks and placed himself between Jiwoo and the Valorians. His hand went to the tool on his belt, not a weapon, but a device that could create sound waves. When he activated it, the noise was so painful that the Valorians fell to the ground holding their heads. Jiwoo stared at the human with her large eyes. "Why?" she asked, her voice like water sounds. "Because," Teo said, still watching the Valorians, "we both need to survive. Alone, we will die. Together, maybe we have a chance." Over the next few hours, more aliens died. The Myrians, creatures made of pure thought and psychic energy, could not adapt to the chemical air. 7 of them died before their group learned to shield their minds. A whole settlement of insectoids simply stopped moving. The heat had melted their organs. The crystalline beings fell one by one, their beautiful forms shattering like broken glass. Teo and Jiwoo found shelter in a crack between two large rocks. It was cooler there, away from the direct heat. Jiwoo's breathing became easier. Teo shared some of his water supplies with her. She did not ask why he was helping her. She simply accepted it. Perhaps, in these first moments of hell, kindness was just as important as strength. As the orange sun began to set, Teo and Jiwoo explored deeper into the rock formations. That was when they found it. Half buried under sand and ash, there was something that did not belong to this world. It was metal, but not any metal either of them recognized. It was smooth and perfect despite being covered in dust for what looked like thousands of years. "What is it?" Jiwoo asked. Teo touched the metal carefully. It was warm but not burning hot. There were symbols on its surface, written in a language he could not read. But there was something underneath these symbols. Steps, an opening, something built into the ground itself. "Shelter," Teo said. "Real shelter. Come on." They descended into darkness. Teo's suit lights came on automatically. The tunnel went deep into the planet. The walls were covered with more symbols, more writing from another time. The air grew cooler. It smelled different, cleaner somehow. As they went deeper, they began to understand that this place had been built by someone, for some reason. Someone who knew how to survive on Karath 7. Above ground, the first day of the test was ending. Thousands of aliens were dead. Others were suffering. The Intergalactic Council watched from orbit, recording everything. They wanted to see which species would survive. But what they did not expect, what they could not have predicted, was that the answer would not be about which single species was strongest. It would be about which creatures were brave enough to help their enemies survive. Teo and Jiwoo stood in the darkness of the ancient tunnel, holding their lights up to see what ancient builders had left behind. They did not know it yet, but this moment, this choice to help a stranger, would change everything about this survival test. It would change the entire future of the galaxy. By the third day on Karath 7, Teo realized that the ancient structure beneath the surface was not just a shelter. It was a factory, a place where machines still worked after thousands of years, humming quietly in the darkness. Jiwoo had discovered control panels with symbols that her species could somehow understand. It was as if the ancient builders had left the machines designed for any intelligent mind to use. Teo was examining a strange device when he heard footsteps. His hand moved to his tools, ready to defend himself. But what came around the corner was not an enemy. It was a Mirian named Haijun. A Mirian was a being without a physical body in the normal sense. They existed as pure energy, contained in a glowing crystalline form that floated above the ground. Haijun was injured, his glow dimmer than a healthy Mirian should be. "I mean no harm," Haijun said, his voice like bells ringing in a cave. "I am alone. My group died when we tried to adapt to the surface. I followed your path down here. I watched you help the Thessian. I need help too." Teo and Jiwoo looked at each other. Helping one stranger had been difficult. Helping another seemed dangerous. But Teo thought about the test the council was running. If the goal was to survive, then more allies meant better chances. He gestured for Haijun to come inside. Over the next 2 days, more people arrived. Min Seo was a Valorian engineer, one of the few of her species who had survived the burning heat. She arrived with injuries, but with intelligence in her eyes. When she saw the ancient machines, she understood them immediately. She began fixing things, making them work better. She could create water from moisture in the air. She could build shields that protected from the radiation. The Valorians were creatures of pure crystal and science, and Min Seo knew how to use both. Then came Kyung-Soo, a Krell warrior. The Krell fought for their hive, not for themselves. Kyung-soo's entire hive had died trying to conquer the surface. He was broken inside, but he was also powerful. He could fight, he could protect, and more importantly, he was willing to listen to Tae-oh instead of just attacking everything. "My hive is dead," Kyung-soo said simply. "I am dead too. Just my body did not know it yet. If I stay with you, at least my death will mean something." By the end of the first week, Tae-oh had gathered 8 allies. Besides Ji-woo, Hae-jun, Min-seo, and Kyung-soo, there was Da-rim, another Thessian who was a skilled scout. There was Tai-sung, a young Mirian who could form bonds between minds. There was Sol, an insectoid who had survived from a different hive, one that had chosen to hide instead of fight. And there was Nari, a Zephian who was made of silicon and stone. Nari could walk in sunlight that would kill others. She was immune to radiation. She was rare and valuable and strong. They worked together in the ancient facility. Min-seo created better tools. Kyung-soo organized them into teams that worked efficiently. Ji-woo found ways to store water and make air that was safe to breathe. Hae-jun used his telepathic abilities to keep everyone connected, making sure they all knew what the others were doing. Tae-oh planned everything, thinking 3 steps ahead like a human who had learned to survive in harsh places. Their underground city began to grow. They found areas in the deep tunnels that had geothermal heat, meaning free energy. They created growing areas where plants from different worlds could survive in controlled environments. They had water, they had air, they had food, they had hope. But on the 9th day, everything changed when Q-ri arrived. Q-ri was a Mirian warrior, sent as a scout by an opposing Mirian faction. Her glow was sharp and violent, designed for combat and control, not healing and cooperation. She crashed through one of their tunnels with weapons of pure energy, looking for anything she could destroy and report back to her superiors. When she found Tae-oh's group, she attacked immediately. It was Hae-jun who stopped her. His telepathic power was stronger than hers. He touched her mind and showed her something. He showed her what Tae-oh had done, how he had helped Ji-woo when there was no benefit for himself, how he had given shelter to enemies, how he had built something instead of destroying it. Kyuri's attack stopped. Her glowing form became smaller, quieter. "Why would you do this?" she asked Tae-oh. "Your people are supposed to be weak. Why do you not fight for resources like everyone else?" "Because," Tae-oh said, "I learned a long time ago that fighting for one piece of bread leaves you too tired to hold it. Helping others build means you never have to fight alone." For 3 days, Kyuri stayed with them, but said nothing. She watched them work. She saw how they treated each other, even when they were tired and angry. She watched Min-seo teach Kyung-soo how to understand Valorian mathematics. She watched Ji-woo and Da-rim explore tunnels together, not as competitors, but as partners. She watched Tae-oh sit with the injured members of the group and give them encouragement. On the 4th day, Kyuri made her choice. She would stay. She told her superiors through a secret communication device that the group below was dead, destroyed by internal conflict. She lied to protect them. She lied because for the first time in her life, she wanted to be part of something that was not about power and control. The 8 had become 9, and then 9 became 10. Above ground, the other surviving aliens struggled. The Valorians fought the Krell. The remaining Mirians fought each other. Multiple species were competing for water and shade and any advantage they could find. Thousands more died each day. The heat did not care if you were powerful. The chemicals did not care if you were from an advanced civilization. Death came for everyone equally. But in the tunnels below, something different was happening. 10 different species, each one different in body and mind, were learning to live as one. They were not the strongest. They were not the most powerful. But they were becoming something more important. They were becoming a family. Tae-oh stood in the central chamber of their underground city, looking at the control panels that Min-seo had repaired. She was showing him how the ancient builders had designed this place as a sanctuary, a safe space, not for one species, but for many. It had waited for thousands of years for someone to understand its purpose. "We are not the first," Minseo said. "There were others before. Others who also learned to work together. This place remembers them." Teo understood then. The test was not about finding the strongest species. The test was about finding if any species could be brave enough to be kind. By the 15th day, Haijun discovered something that changed everything. He was exploring the deepest levels of the ancient structure when he found a chamber filled with information. Thousands of objects covered in symbols and writing, arranged carefully as if someone had taken great care to preserve them. Haijun used his telepathic abilities to touch these objects. Images and knowledge flowed into his mind. When he returned to the main group, he was different. His glow was dim. His movements were slow. He had seen too much. "The world was not always this way," he told them, his voice trembling with the weight of what he had learned. "Once, Karath 7 was beautiful. Water covered the land. Gardens grew. The beings who built these tunnels walked under green skies. But something happened. They created weapons. They fought wars. They destroyed their own world. They burned it from the inside out." Teo sat down slowly, understanding the terrible truth. "This is not natural. The heat, the chemicals, all of it. This world was made this way." "Worse," Haijun said. "There is a system, a planetary defense. The ancient builders created a way to protect the world from destruction. If any species becomes too aggressive, too violent, too destructive, the system activates. It creates storms. It causes earthquakes. It releases toxins. It fights back." Curie's glow flickered with confusion and anger. "So, they weaponized a planet? They made a world into a weapon?" "No," came a new voice from the shadows. Everyone turned to see a figure emerging from a tunnel none of them had seen before. It was another alien, this one made of crystalline structures but harder, darker than Minseo's people. They made a test, a sanctuary with teeth. The newcomer introduced himself as Nari, though he looked different from the Nari they knew. He explained that he was older, much older, and that he came from a tribe of Zephians that had been studying Karath 7 for decades. His people had decoded more of the ancient texts. Karath 7 was created as a sanctuary, Nari explained, a place where species could learn to live together. But the ancient builders learned something important. Species will not choose cooperation unless they have no other choice. So they created this world, a hell that only becomes heaven if you work together. If you fight, you lose. If you cooperate, you might survive. The group looked at each other. They understood the implications. Every alien species on the surface, every group fighting and competing, was making the world worse. The planetary defense system was targeting them, punishing their violence with more heat, more chemicals, more suffering. "We have to tell them," Jiwoo said immediately. "We have to make them stop fighting." "They will not believe us," Kyungsoo said. "They will think we are weak and are trying to trick them." But Teo was already thinking. "We do not tell them. We show them. We take the control panels from this facility and we broadcast the truth directly into their minds. Minseo, can you do that?" Minseo was already examining the ancient technology. Her crystal fingers moved across controls that hummed with power. "Yes, but it will take time, and we will be exposed. They will know where we are." "Then we prepare for war," Kyungsoo said, his warrior nature rising to the surface. "We prepare for them to come and destroy us." But Teo had a different plan. Instead of fighting, he decided to show compassion in the face of their impending danger. He sent out a signal to all the surviving aliens. The message was simple. Come to these coordinates. No weapons, no armies, just yourselves. We have something important to share. He was either a genius or a fool, perhaps both. 2 days later, they launched the broadcast. Every alien on Karath 7 received the information directly into their minds. The recordings from the ancient texts played out. They saw the world as it was. They saw the beautiful past. They saw the destroyed world. They saw the truth about the planetary defense system. Most importantly, they saw Teo's group. A human, Thessians, Mirians, Valorians, Krell, Zephians, and Insectoids, all working together, all alive, all thriving where everyone else was dying. Some aliens came to find them, others did not. Some were too damaged by violence to believe in cooperation anymore. The Valorians refused to stop fighting. A faction of Krell attacked the tunnels, convinced that the ancient technology could be used as a weapon to dominate others. The attack was fierce and sudden. Kyung-Soo and Sul organized the defense. Nari used his radiation immunity to reach areas the attackers could not. Minseo activated protective barriers around the main chambers, but it was Haijun and Kyuri who made the crucial decision. They used their combined telepathic power to touch the minds of every attacker, not to control them, but to show them what they were doing, to make them feel, just for a moment, what it was like to be attacked, to kill, to destroy. The Krell faction stopped. They looked around in horror at what they had become. Some walked away without another word. Others asked to join the growing group. But the planetary defense system was growing angrier. The world was responding to the continued violence. Massive storms formed above the surface. Volcanoes that had been dormant for thousands of years began to wake up. The ground itself shook and split open. The ancient builder's warning system was escalating. That was when Nari made a discovery that might save them all. There was a biological organism living deep in the planet's core, a creature made of pure chemistry that consumed and filtered the toxic compounds. If they could cultivate it, spread it through the world, they could begin healing Karath 7 itself. They could change the world from a hellish prison into something habitable. It will take months, Minseo warned, maybe years, and we will have to go into the deepest places, places where the heat will kill most of us. Then we will have to be very careful, Teo said simply, and we will have to trust each other completely. The 10 looked at each other. They had made it through the worst the world could throw at them. They had survived not by being strong, but by being together. Now they would have to be even braver. They would have to save an entire world, not just themselves. For the first time since arriving on Karath 7, they had a purpose that was bigger than survival. They had hope. The volcanoes erupted on the 20th day. The ground split open across the planet's surface like wounds. Lava flowed down the mountain sides in rivers of fire. Ash clouds filled the sky, making the already dark world almost completely black. The survivors on the surface began to panic. Thousands tried to run to the tunnels at once, creating chaos and violence. In the panic, a coalition formed, not through agreement or discussion, but through fear and desperation. The Valorians, along with several Krell hives that had not joined Teo's faction, decided that the underground sanctuary was not a place of cooperation. It was a resource to control. They organized an assault. If they could take the ancient facility and its technology, they could use it to protect themselves and dominate all other survivors on the planet. The attack came without warning. 3,000 armed aliens, organized into military formations, marched toward the tunnels. They were not interested in discussion. They were not interested in cooperation. They wanted power, and they were willing to kill for it. Teo was in the deep core chambers with Nari when the alarms started blaring. Jiwoo's voice came through the communication system, panicked and urgent. "They are coming. Thousands of them. They are entering the outer tunnels." "Evacuate non-combatants," Teo ordered immediately. "Kyung-Soo, organize the defenses. Minseo, prepare to collapse the upper tunnels if they get too close to the main chambers." Teo and Nari moved quickly upward through the structure. They had to coordinate the defense and assess how bad the situation really was. As they moved, the entire facility began to shake. The planetary defense system was reacting to the violence and aggression. An earthquake shook the tunnels, causing ceiling sections to crash down. Aliens screamed as massive rocks fell on them. The ancient structure, built to last thousands of years, began to crumble. The invading force was caught in the collapse. Thousands died immediately, crushed under tons of stone and metal. But the assault did not stop. The survivors pushed forward, using the chaos as cover, climbing over the bodies of the dead, driven by desperation and the instinct to survive. Kyung-soo made a stand in a narrow tunnel. His warrior brothers and sisters from his hive formed a line, bodies interlocked, ready to fight to the death. Behind them, the others prepared the final defenses. Haijun and Kyuri linked their minds, ready to use telepathic power as a weapon if necessary. Min-seo prepared the facility's ancient weapons systems designed for defense that she only partially understood. The two sides clashed. Krell fought Krell. Valorians fought Kyung-soo's warriors. The tunnel became a nightmare of violence and death. Bodies fell. Blood, different colors for different species, covered the stone floor. Kyung-soo took a terrible wound across his side but refused to retreat. Around him, his warriors died. Some fell to enemy weapons. Others fell when the ceiling collapsed again. But then something happened that no one expected. The planetary defense system intensified its response. The ground did not just shake, it moved. An electromagnetic pulse swept through the tunnels, knocking every creature to the ground, disabling their weapons, their communication devices, everything electronic. The ancient builder's system was not just defending the sanctuary, it was stopping the war. In the chaos and confusion, Teo found himself separated from his group. He was alone in a collapsing tunnel with dust and debris falling around him. His suit was damaged. His communication was offline. He had no weapons and no way to know if his friends were alive or dead. That was when he heard a voice, weak and frightened. "Help! Is anyone there?" Teo found a Zephian buried under fallen rocks. But this was not a Zephian soldier. This was different. Her crystalline form was cracked and broken. Her name was Hebin, and she was not part of the attacking force. She had been caught in the collapse by accident. When Teo asked why she was here, she explained through pain and tears. "My people, we decided to join the assault. We were told you had stolen technology that belonged to all species. We were told we had to take it back." She coughed, blood dripping from her mouth. "But as I moved through the tunnels, I saw something. I saw Tai Sung, the young Mirian who gives water to anyone who is injured. I saw Darim, the scout who carries food for the weak. I saw you. I saw a human, protecting someone who was not your own kind. I tried to leave the assault, to warn you, but the collapse happened." Teo worked quickly to pull Heben out from under the rocks. She was badly hurt, her body damaged in multiple places. A normal being would not have survived. But Zephians were made of silicon and stone, stronger than they appeared. With Teo's help, she stood up slowly. "Why?" she asked. "Why did you save me?" "I was trying to kill you." "Because," Teo said, "I need to believe that even when people make bad choices, they can still change. I need to believe that kindness is stronger than aggression. And I need to believe that we can all find a better way together." They moved through the damaged tunnels together. The electromagnetic pulse had faded, but the destruction was immense. They found Kyung-soo first, unconscious and badly wounded but alive. Then they found the main group. Min-seo was injured but functional. Haijun and Kyuri had collapsed from using too much telepathic power. Ji-woo was crying, covered in the blood of fallen friends. Tai Sung was dead, killed protecting younger members of their group. The loss was enormous, but they had survived. And more importantly, Many of the attacking aliens had survived too, separated from their weapons and their commanders, suddenly aware of what they had done and what they had been willing to do. Above ground, the volcanic activity had begun to subside. The planetary defense system was no longer escalating. It was as if Karath 7 itself was satisfied. The message had been delivered. Violence would not be tolerated. Cooperation was the only path forward. In the aftermath of the assault, the survivors began to gather, not in organized military formations, but in groups seeking shelter and help. The attacking aliens, confused and traumatized by what had happened, began to realize the truth. They had lost. But not because Teo's group was stronger. They had lost because the planet itself would not allow violence to succeed. Some aliens left to try to survive on their own. Others, including Hebin and her entire Zephian faction, asked for permission to join the sanctuary. They wanted to learn how to be part of something greater than themselves. They wanted to understand what Taio had offered them. The sanctuary grew, but now it was burdened with wounded and traumatized survivors. The work would be harder. But they had something they did not have before. They had proof. They had evidence that cooperation was not weakness. Cooperation was the only strength that mattered on Karath 7. Teo sat in the darkness of a damaged tunnel, holding Kyung-Soo's hand while Nari worked to heal his wounds. Above them, the planet slowly stabilized. The fire began to fade. In the distance, they could hear something unexpected. Rain. For the first time in thousands of years, Karath 7 was crying, and perhaps, through those tears, the world was beginning to heal. A month after the Great Assault, Karath 7 was beginning to change. The rain that had started as a trickle became regular. The volcanic ash began to settle. The toxic chemicals in the air were slowly being consumed and filtered by the organisms that Nari had helped cultivate. The planet was still harsh and dangerous, but it was becoming less like a death trap and more like a place where life could actually exist. Teo called the first council meeting on the ground level of the ancient sanctuary. The chamber was filled with representatives from different species. Not just the 10 who had built the sanctuary together, but now also leaders from the hundreds of other survivors who had joined them. They sat in a circle, each one different, each one speaking a different language that translation devices tried to interpret. "We are standing at a crossroads," Teo said simply. "We can continue as we are, just surviving, waiting for rescue ships from the council. Or we can choose to build something new. Something that has never existed before. A world where multiple species work together not because they have to, but because they want to." The representatives looked at each other nervously. The idea was beautiful, but terrifying. The ancient ways, the old traditions, taught that species competed with each other. Working together meant weakness. It meant losing your cultural identity. It meant change. But then, Hebin spoke. She had been with Teo for weeks now, learning his ways. "My people were ready to kill for what we thought was right. But I was wrong. I was wrong. And humans saved me anyway. If that is not a reason to try something new, I do not know what is." Others began to speak. Jiwoo talked about how Thessians were taught that they could only survive in water, but here she was, breathing dry air and living. Darim spoke about how her people had always hidden from other species, but hiding had only led to loneliness and death. Min Seo, with her scientific mind, presented data showing that cooperation resulted in better outcomes for all species. The council lasted for 3 days. Arguments happened, disagreements erupted, but unlike the violence that had come before, this was discussion. This was people working together to find answers, even when they did not agree. Slowly, a vision began to form. They would organize into work groups. Each group would have members from multiple species working toward a common goal. Engineers like Minseo would work with Valorians and Krell warriors to rebuild and expand the underground sanctuary. Farmers would work together to cultivate crops from different worlds in the protected growing chambers. Healers would work across species lines to develop medicines that worked for different physiology. Scientists would study the planet together to understand how to continue healing it, and crucially, they would establish laws. Laws that protected every individual, no matter what species they came from. Laws that guaranteed shelter, food, and safety for all. Laws that made violence a last resort, not a first response. The work was intense. Months passed in focused effort. The sanctuary expanded, new chambers were opened and prepared, systems were installed and maintained. But what amazed everyone was how well different species worked together when they had a shared goal. The Krell, so often thought of as mindless warriors, turned out to be excellent at organizing groups and maintaining discipline. The Mirians, with their telepathic abilities, could coordinate complex projects across vast distances. The Thessians brought adaptability and creativity. The Valorians brought logic and problem-solving. The Zephians brought physical strength and endurance. And humans, somehow, brought something that held it all together. An ability to see what others needed, to provide hope when hope was hard to find. Then, on the 100th day, the crash came. A ship descended from the sky through the newly clear atmosphere. It was not a council rescue vessel. It was much smaller. When it landed and opened, a figure emerged that shocked everyone. It was another human. A man named Dong Ha, who had been piloting a supply vessel when it suffered damage. His navigation systems had sent him directly to Karath 7, where he crash-landed searching for any sign of civilization. Dongha was terrified and confused when he emerged to find the ruins of a once beautiful sanctuary and thousands of aliens working together. He thought they were going to kill him, but Teo welcomed him as he had welcomed everyone else. "Why are you helping me?" Dongha asked in his own language, the language of Earth, which made Teo smile for the first time in weeks. "Because," Teo said, "you are alone, and you are afraid, and you are my kind, and that means something to me, but not more than anyone else who is alone and afraid." Dongha stayed. He learned quickly, and he brought with him knowledge from the human space. He brought stories and ideas and new perspectives that helped the growing civilization expand further. As months turned to seasons, Karath 7 transformed completely. The toxic clouds cleared away. Seeds brought from 1,000 worlds began to grow. A city emerged from the underground, with open-air sections where breathable atmosphere had been restored. Gardens grew where only ash had existed before. Water systems were installed. Energy systems powered by geothermal heat ran through everything. The Intergalactic Council maintained its observation posts in orbit. They watched and recorded everything. They had expected 50 species to arrive at this test. They had expected one dominant species to emerge victorious. Instead, they were seeing something unprecedented. They were seeing peace. They were seeing cooperation. They were seeing a civilization built on the principle that differences could be a strength instead of a weakness. The core group had grown to 12. The original 10, plus Hebin, plus Dongha. They were chosen by the community, not because they were the strongest or the smartest, but because they had proven they could lead with compassion. Teo remained the main leader, but he made decisions with council votes. Minseo ran the engineering department, but listened to Kyung-Soo's practical suggestions. Haijun and Kyuri led the research teams, but included Nari's ancient knowledge. Jiwoo managed agriculture and water systems, but worked closely with Hebin to understand Zephian stone knowledge. On the day when the first harvest from the replanted gardens was gathered, Teo stood on a hill overlooking the new city. The sky above was blue now, real blue, with actual clouds instead of toxic ash. The ground beneath his feet was cool and stable. Around him, aliens from dozens of species worked together, harvested together, celebrated together. Dong Ha came and stood beside him, also human, also far from home, but somehow more at home than either of them had ever been. "Do you think the council will accept this?" Dong Ha asked. Teo was quiet for a long moment. "I do not know. But I do know that what we have built here is real. It is not perfect. There are still disagreements and problems. But we are choosing to solve them together instead of destroying each other. I think that matters more than what the council decides." Below them, Kareth 7 had become what the ancient builders had always intended. Not a test of strength, but a test of the heart. A place where different beings could learn to see each other not as threats, but as possibilities. A sanctuary for those willing to believe that cooperation was worth the risk.